Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I said I'd have a stream this Saturday, and here we are. Today, I am joined by the current president of the Old Glory Club, writer and friend of mine, Redhawk. How are you, sir?
I'm well, Prude. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I got my cup of coffee in front of me. Things really can't go wrong. So I know that the title for today's stream seems a little bit obscure. You're wondering, Manosphere, feminist foreign policy. What the hell is all that? Well, we're going to be doing all that we can to sort of break this down today. This sort of came to our attention after we were sent this rather lengthy tweet into sort of our OGC chat that we have for the founding members of the organization. And it was this lengthy report from an organization called Diverting Hate about the Manosphere and sort of these concerns over terrorism. We're going to go through that report today, but when I was reading through it, I was pleasantly surprised. Well, not pleasantly surprised. It's a terrible way to phrase it. But I wasn't surprised to see this kind of literature being used in foreign policy circles as well. And in fact, the first time I heard the word feminist foreign policy was about almost a decade ago in 2014 about Boko Haram and the whole bring back our girls thing. And a lot of the literature about sort of why men join these terrorist organizations, I'm now seeing in this Diverting Hate report. So as always, as we've noticed on the right, there's always going to be this global war on terror coming from home. But we've got the report up in front of us. But Redhawk, what are some of your initial thoughts or feelings, or where do you want to take this? Because I've got the report up here on screen.
Well, I think one of the first places we should start here is one of the things the report tries to do here is they basically break it up into three parts. They want to try and first of all, find the intellectual foundations of inceldom and such, and they go into a long report of like where the term first came from. They claim it came from this one chick who did it as like a graduate project. I went and talked to Roel Tomasi and Rhinestone and a bunch of my other friends here, and was basically asking them, is there any validity to this at all, where the origins of the term was? Because I'd never heard of this chick ever before this report. And I was like, this sounds fishy to me. And it's even worse when you actually look into the report and they try to claim that, this single girl who founded the original incel forum, it was originally a place for inclusivity. She even had a tab on there for gay and homosexual couples, and then the big bad men came in and pushed her out and turned the inceldom into a non-inclusive space. And I was like, this sounds like complete bullshit to me. So, of course, as I did some more digging, indeed, I found that, no, there's no validity to this at all whatsoever. They're just trying to form a narrative around it. And then what they try to do in the report is attach the incel phenomenon to the manosphere broadly, which if you are at all active in the community, you will know that that is absolutely not how this goes. Incel guys probably give us more hate than any other group, to be honest. There's a lot of factional infighting, as it were. But then what they also try to do is they try to attach the incel phenomenon over here and the rise of violence, like from people like Elliot Rodger back in 2014. They got their one data point from almost a decade ago now. And, it's like a comedian, get new material, but of course they're going to run that one into the ground. And what they try to do in the report is attach Russian bots and Russian disinformation and Russian radicalization in what is called the Russian manosphere to inceldom and manosphere over here in the English-speaking world. So they're trying to draw a connection. How the State Department likes to, run things these days. Everything is big bad Russia. So I found that to be absolutely hilarious as well in here, because obviously, Prude, Russian and English are kind of two very separate languages, and it's not like we have a lot of back and forths and such. And when I was reading through this report about the Russian sections, I'd never heard of any of these guys before, or any of these organizations. They're trying to make this manosphere a global centralized organization, but that's simply not what it is. We're decentralized for obvious reasons. So that was another very strange part of this thing. And I was actually kind of interested when I was reading through this, because the Russian manosphere, they're definitely further along on this process than you would say people in the States are, simply because they actually have organizations on the ground meeting in offices, They would go around and send their guys to go out and dox Russian journalists that were dating foreigners, because you guys got to remember, Russia, after the Soviet Union fell and such, and they had such a cleansing of their male population. Even in Russia today, the population is significantly more female than it is male. And so a lot of the women in Russia will go and, as we all know, the stereotype, the foreign Russian bride and such. So it's very popular over there for women to seek out foreigners and such. And this is pissing off a lot of the underclass of the Russian men. So they're forming these groups and such to go out and, dox female journalists that will date foreigners or try to look for, a way to get out of Russia and such. So yeah, your underclass of men there, it's becoming more and more difficult for them to find mates and such. So they turn to more radical means of solving their reproductive problem, which this is definitely something we could get into later here, Prude. But I argue largely this isn't really occurring in the United States, because the populations over here in the West are just so sedated with things like pornography. Moral qualms aside, what pornography actually is just a excuse me, it's a sedation tool for you. I argue if that wasn't here, you'd probably have way more acts of violence and such like this that you see in other countries, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, no, this is the thing that I've always found particularly interesting with the Russian claims, because one, I think it is very important to detail that there is Russian like presence or sort of desires to infiltrate or take advantage of sort of spheres of the online right, or what Bizlit on Twitter likes to call like dissident online weirdos, DAOs. Because there are some people on the internet that have various niche projects, whether they be Manosphere, political people, or guys online that like to make content, but their politics are just, I really hate liberals. But I mean, everything from like the Blue Moon of Georgia, which of course is got a very pro-Russian tinge to it, and it speaks in English. I was looking up this stuff just now, and I've never heard of these guys before. And of course, I'm seeing this expulsion in 2016. You've got a male state Facebook page, and we've seen reports out of Congress from the quote unquote Russian collusion in 2016. And the Facebook memes and things are not particularly good. There were a few accounts on Twitter. I think it was like Tennessee GOP that was backed, that was Russian, of course. A Blue Moon of Alabama, thank you, Tulpacourt, and chat. But no, I mean, there is a Russian influence on there. And I mean, there is documentation, there is reports about how there is a desire to influence the political right. Because I mean, political, subterfuge and influence is a way to just, of course, cause discord inside of the country, which makes it very important for how we carry ourselves on the internet. But again, you have sort of the MGTOW rhetoric that they report here. Of course, issues over tensions and a masculinity narrative over dating foreigners or race. Telegram, it was banned on Telegram. So I guess
yeah, that's the other thing that the report tries to make. They so basically, because that certain Manosphere groups, you'll see this over here where like guys will sell courses and such and be like, oh, be part of my ultimate men's group, and they'll use a Telegram chat for guys that buy their course. And that's the argument they make, because guys over here use Telegram, and Telegram is a Russian, a Russian app. Therefore, then these guys must have some kind of connection to these other Russian groups. And I'm sitting here talking with all the bigwigs in the Manosphere today, and none of us have ever heard of any of these guys. I was mentioning before, the language barrier is kind of going to be a difficult ask here. And yeah, they're trying to paint this organization as a global threat, the global threat on terror, of course, which we'll get into.
Yeah, no, and I mean, so this report feels like it's a very perfectly designed way to just say, listen, if you are parents of a young man, a teenager, and he starts saying certain language, like this feels very much like, to me, a repeat of the 2016 Jordan Peterson rhetoric. Like if your son is reading 12 Rules for Life, or if he's lifting weights, trying to eat healthier, abstaining from drugs and alcohol, he might be a right-wing extremist. And of course, this isn't the first time we've seen issues over quote unquote incel terrorism. I mean, we saw this when the 2019 film Joker came out. I don't think there was a single reported incident of violence at all, but this was the FBI, of course, was notified. There were increased police presence at various movie theaters and cities across the United States. And to me, it just illustrates again, a strong push for the counterterrorism that comes for home, and it comes at home. And I was telling Redhawk this before we went live on the air, but there's a lot of conversation over like what brings men to be quote unquote radicalized, or what brings men to say, terrorist organizations or actions. I don't think men that are learning from pickup artists how to get chicks are going to be America's future terrorists. But we've noticed in this sort of day and age politically are two things. There's a lot of hand wringing over what I would call the eternal sales pitch. The eternal sales pitch when it comes to various groups, political movements, figures, etc., is why settle when you can be better. This is the big, I think, through line for a lot of Manosphere or pickup artistry guys. I also say this is the same thing with a lot of vitalists, like the Bronze Age pervert types, where they'll be like, well, why settle when you can be better? Like, why settle for some schleppy, overweight woman, or when you could be fit and ripped and an intellectual? Even if you don't become that, that's a much more alluring sales pitch than the hand wringing, impotent kind of National Review conservatism that we see. And this also is applied towards, the same issue over, well, women, of course, is the men and women getting together, procreating. That's the basis of all civilizational survival. You have to procreate. So if you're telling men, reject the ideology of the day, become something better, step over it, you also see this literature and this kind of rhetoric that we're seeing here. This was originally applied not just to sort of like the right wing or applied to extremist groups in the United States or foreign groups, say like the Russians in the collusion, but it was also applied towards a lot of terrorist organizations in sub-Saharan Africa. And we're going to get into that later because there's a lot of overlap between these kind of diverting hate reports and the kind of quote unquote feminist foreign policy that is brought up by various NGOs and State Department think tanks that are affiliated with the White House. And this has been going on for almost 20 years now over how to address violence against women and so on, and how that applies to terrorism. And now it's coming here at home. And I think that that's an important understanding that the title sounds weird, but there is a very close connection between these two varying schools and ideologies. And it's important for you to understand this, I think, because anytime you see a new policy report or a new sort of school of thought on terrorism, know that it's either going to be workshopped at home or it's going to be workshopped abroad, and then it will come home for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the other things I want to bring everyone's attention to here in this report is just that meme we just had right there. yeah, you can see why. That's one of the memes from these Russian guys. But anywho, the overall way that these guys in this report, and what you'll see from any mainstream to address the quote unquote incel problem or the male loneliness problem or why are men so upset and angry, their first response always is to, oh, well, we just need to teach men to be more emotive with their feelings. We need to meet them, make sure that they're heard. It's okay to be a pussy and cry. It's horrible the way your ancestors were for thousands of years before this, and now we're going to teach you a better way. And we know this doesn't work. Feminism has had over 100 years now at this point in the West to show men a better way, and they have failed abysmally. It's done now. This is no longer a discussion. This is no longer a negotiation. The men are speaking. The men are in the room now. The men are talking, and we are going to fix the issues that we're having with men all across the West right now in our own way. And the number one group of guys in the entire world, you may not like them. You may not like some of their descriptions of things. You may not like some of the things they talk about, but the Manosphere at the end of the day is telling the truth. Period. Full stop. There's no objections to that. You can't at this point. And a group of guys who came around in a decentralized manner and were just swapping notes online to try and figure out what the hell is going on with all of our societies today in the West. And this is the kind of stuff that really pisses me off, because when they try to equate in this report, when they go from Russian extremist groups and then they try to tie that to Andrew Tate because he's over there in Romania, and then they try to tie Andrew Tate over here to the rest of the Manosphere guys going on in the West who have no communication networks between the two of them. They're all doing radically different things, even though they might all be talking relatively the same language here. But to try and equate somebody with like Rollo Tomassi, and believe me, there's plenty of reasons to have issues with the guy, particularly in the last 2 years. But the guy saved hundreds of men, from sticking a gun in their mouths, and to equate him to one of these incel terrorists, like that other report you sent me proved from India, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, no, and I mean this was again you have the cultural crossover, the Allen Mall shooting that happened earlier this year, a couple months back. I don't live too far from that area, and it was kind of a surprise to me. And of course, this is the to some extent we like to meme about it online, but you have the quote unquote like Mexican white supremacist. But I mean, this guy was the New York Post has got an article on him. That they've got he was on Russian social media sites, which is the one that you see appear on the report. Various rants about becoming a full blown white supremacist, and he wants to do these things to wake white people up, which anytime that these sort of things happen, of course, brings the terror, the counter terrorists and the state regime against you, which is why you'll never hear anything from Redhawk or myself or the old Glory Club saying, you need to be doing activism or something like that. Never be doing anything that draws the eye of Sauron on you. But when you have these disparate data points, whether it be Elliot Rodger or this, or just the general sort of online attitude, I think that this goes back to something that Redhawk and I have talked about separately on our own. But I think this is an area where we might definitely agree on, which is that there is no male space. The internet used to be a predominantly male area. Gaming used to be a male area. This is how like Gamergate really blew up. You have the discussion over the Longhouse as well. I mean, when you push men into a corner, and we've already seen male suicide go up. I've talked about this not too long ago. Men are looking for answers, and unfortunately, yes, sometimes these things do happen. But to say that Redhawk or even the guy who wrote The Rational Male, something I read in college, I don't think Rollo Tomassi was telling me to go, take up arms and throw some Romans out in public. And it's important to consider that, you take a few disparate data points, notable exceptions, and apply it writ large to an entire ecosystem. This is how, again, basic counter-terrorist operations, as well as what I would call like digital ecology, gets applied and begins to target the regular ordinary people looking for answers. And this is the thing I love to ask people. Redhawk, you can answer this question for me. What is the progressive male role model for a straight white man who's progressive?
there isn't one, unless you want to go become a troon, or something like that.
That's the answer I get all the time, because that's just the basic truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah.
And I just love how, whether it's we were talking before we went live here about the Wall Street Journal report that came out a couple months ago, and this report right here, and a myriad of other ones, because I'm sure, this is just the first one that has caught everyone's eye, because BX broke it on Twitter.
Journal one up.
Yeah, but there we go. Look at that image. Big angry. But
John Krause, thank you so much for your artistic,
Yeah, doing a great job there. But yeah, I love how just the tone that you hear in all of these things is why are men so angry, and men shouldn't be angry. It's like, well, sitting back looking here in 2023, I think there's a lot of damn reasons for men to be angry at this point. And this idea that, it's just that men find themselves into these online, radicalization points. And here's the other thing they try to make in the report. They try to blame everything on Twitter, basically, because some of these accounts have hundreds of thousands of views, and they're just doing it to make money and such, which if anyone actually knows, like the guys that partake in the sphere, like it's not exactly a great way to make a buck. There's a huge Pareto distribution of people that are trying to make money on there, but that's besides the point. But the argument they're trying to make is, because social media wants to make money, they'll promote this kind of content. And the second that somebody finds this content, they become radicalized. No, that's not how this works. It's never how this works. Men come to the Manosphere because they basically have nowhere else to go. We're not putting up our, our ads on your billboards in your local town here as you're driving down the highway or anything like this. Nobody in the mainstream is covering us except to dunk on us. We're not getting any positive press. So people come and find us because they don't know what else to do. They, go into Google and they Google, why won't my wife fuck me anymore? Or why is the wife beating the kids? Or why can't I attract women? Or any of those questions. And then they come and find us because all the other traditional institutions for men have completely failed and have led them down, unproductive paths. And so that's why they're there. They're not there because oh, I saw one Andrew Tate video and therefore I'm radicalized. It's like, no, they were already pissed off because the world is pretty shitty towards men now. And, they're looking for answers.
Yeah, this is what I like to just call the falling down syndrome, where people are already in a pretty bad state, and this is where people start looking for answers. And this has been the way, really, since the inception of the internet. I mean, even prior to that, you had pickup artistry, VHS tapes, and things that you could purchase, sort of that kind of way where you could record a video of yourself for dating if you had troubles going out and about or socializing. But I mean, the internet has totally changed our method of communication. I mean, most people aren't really literate these days. This is why, again, I think that sort of the pickup artistry, or the just even doing streams, even in sort of like, say, non-white sort of manosphere circles, especially with like black, red pill communities. Like, I mean, what are you going
Yeah.
to do, right? Like, you can communicate effectively. You can live stream. You can, show off game frame, your own strength in your own body in a way that tells people, like, listen, this is an accessible thing to you. You have to put the effort in, and you give people a sense of motivation and direction. This is what's going to happen. And that's definitely the case that I think is what we're dealing with right now. And so, yeah, you look it up here, and this is from the Wall Street Journal. This is from the same people by Diverting Hate, which of course is the report we were just reading from earlier got money from the McCain Institute, the federal government, and Middlebury College. But this report comes out earlier, or this little article came out in September. The suicide rate among men is 4 times higher than that of women. I mean, that's definitely always been the case. 65% of men in the U.S. are hesitant to seek professional help for stress, anxiety, or depression. I mean, there's a lot of, I think everyone knows that the problems with men are bad, and men are going to seek their solutions where they can. Unfortunately, there are some that are driven to violence, and that's something that we don't want to have happen. Again, in 2014, I know what you're referencing here, but we're not going to name him. The same thing within Toronto, 2018, alluding to a quote unquote incel rebellion. Diverting Hate has nearly $700,000 in funding from the Department of Homeland Security, which views online hate as a driver of targeted violence, domestic terrorism. The group targets younger men ages 18 to 34, trying to meet them where they linger on social platforms, and political extremism and sexism are easily found. It's easy to radicalize a disenfranchised, lonely man online. When he feels he has no place, anger helps him feel seen, says Baldoni.
I
And
love
this is,
the
go ahead.
response that these people have every time. It's, oh, we need to attack the social media people. We need to attack the guys that are actually, putting out this material, that are writing the books and are doing the live streams and everything. But nobody ever sits back to think, oh, maybe the men actually do have some legitimate grievances here, and maybe we should actually address their problems. No, no, no. We just got to suppress the information. That'll fix everything.
Well, I'm reminded. Let's go back, what, a decade ago, where famously, who's not in the manosphere in any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, even Carl Benjamin is just like, why is a female member of parliament laughing at the fact that, like, male suicide is at an all-time high in Great Britain? The whole men's problems awareness day that some male MPs wanted to put forward, and she was just laughing at it. And this is what you have happen. And I mean, we've seen the logical consequences of this. There was a report that came out earlier, I think it was from the Pew Research Center, that basically said Gen Z men who are graduating from high school are further politically to the right, while their female counterparts are further to the left. So you have this, like, large political divide. And men, of course, are being told to compromise. Men are being told to, maybe soften their image. And if not, like, the political partisan divide is going to cause an already, crappy, fertility replacement rate, to go even further down. So again, we've made all problems political. We've commodified all problems to a degree where, ideology is an easy brand in-group preference thing. Like, oh, I'm MGTOW. Oh, I'm incel. Oh, I'm this. Oh, I'm right wing or whatever. And when you do that, I think that a big portion of this is that people look for band-aid solutions to their problems. So a label or a political subgroup is a great way to slap a band-aid on a gaping, sucking chest wound. Like, sure, you can do the whole plastic bag and some gauze over it to, like, try and resume air pressure to breathe, but that's not going to solve the fact that you've just been shot in the chest. And this is where we're at. And I think that this is a very important thing to consider here is that this has been an ongoing problem, where, this summer, Diverting Hate is problem. Men focused support and suicide prevention groups, Visible Men, Men Alive, Men Enough, have been running ads to provide camaraderie over their rants. The irritable female syndrome reads a post from that diverting hate plans to place on X, while crafted to appeal to a man's angry side, it will link them to an article explaining that women might be irritated and how they might respond with compassion.
Do you hear this nonsense? This is literally the hundreds of men die in war, women most affected. Again, every single fucking time they do this, it's so infuriating. No wonder the men are angry.
Yeah, and again, to make the connection to the Russian pickup scene as we've seen elsewhere, you know, if the Russians want to make a, I'm just speaking from our what's been reported by Congress, the DoD, and the Department of Homeland Security over the 2016 and 2020 election. If you're going to be doing any kind of Russian counterintelligence operation or any kind of agitprop, you're going to do your shit in English. That's pretty straightforward. I mean, the difference might be, especially with the war in Ukraine, you might be reading things on Telegram that you can translate, but outside of that, no. That's just definitely not the case here. But here we go. The more links to the Russians, I'm reading through the other report and trying to find something else here. So here you go. The intersectionality of the Manosphere, the Russian Allen shooter, which happened. One example of that, this sort of intersection. One of the cruel aspects of Garcia's radicalization was the concept of perceiving members of the extreme far right as living real masculine ideologies to the fullest, propagating their dominance through violent racial, cultural, and racist ideologies, is what the report says. Again, the same thing that we saw at the beginning of the war in Palestine, a whole, oh, this is the actual Bronze Age mindset or whatever. Whereas there's a whole litany of work that says, listen, do not be doing anything that's going to get you targeted by the feds. And most people, I think, know what time it is. I mean, whether it be from January 6th or just billions of dollars that have been put into, this sort of political social programming that, hey, there are other ways to live other than as a man, to be fit, healthy, to have a healthy life. And I mean, you don't even have to be a pickup artist to do this. Like, I'm not, but to have a healthy social life, to take care of your body, to eat better, to have a good social life, and to be capable to not have your spaghetti fall out of your pockets, and to have good frame when talking to women. That would make you an extremist in the eyes of some of these people. And to me, that illustrates the bigger problem that we have here is that the quote unquote, incel terrorism problem, while minute in comparison to, say, BLM, Antifa, or anything else that, affects men, this is what we choose our dollars to focus on, which of course primarily targets straight white men, as we've seen here. And then, of course, the report goes into, profitability, how many people, make money. This is, again, that sort of, you remember that whole Data and Society report, Redhawk, from 2017,
Yeah.
just sort of being like, hey, this YouTuber was on a live stream with this YouTuber, therefore they're a part of this like shadowy alt-right web of lies and whatever. And it's just, that's what led to like one of the first major adpocalypses. But yeah, so we have of course, there's the role of social media. We're going to look into the brief landscape of this. So, we have to mention Pearl Davis. Thank God, right, for someone just drifting. In addition to criticizing progressive societies and making the case for more conservative gender norms, their primary gimmick is the production of content that humiliates a specific type of woman, optimized to garner engagement online and foster international cognizance. Oh,
Yeah.
I feel like there's always they're the minority. This is not for them.
No, everyone should be looking upon any woman that comes into the manosphere with an extreme degree of scrutiny. 9 times out of 10, they are there for deceptive reasons. Pearl is absolutely guilty of this. I remember one of her most egregious, violations of trust, I should say, is when she invited Rolo on one of her streams and punked him by having Nick Fuentes join the stream as well at the same time. So I have, obviously none of us have a love for Fuentes, especially in the last couple of years with his behavior. But that was particularly egregious given that, now you have a direct line to associate, Fuentes with other Manosphere people, which, again, they were trying to do in this report here. And also, I'm going to have to take a couple shots at our own side here as well, because guys going online for easy Twitter clicks to dunk on Andrew Tate without doing their own research and trying to claim that, Andrew Tate is the face of the Manosphere, when the guy just came on the scene a couple of years ago by plagiarizing a bunch of work from the guys that actually put in the work over the last 20 years and saying, oh, this is the Manosphere as a whole. You guys are also partial to blame for this as well by casting this wide net without doing your research and just looking for easy Twitter clicks and likes to your audience. You're partially responsible for this as well.
Mm. Well, this goes back to the issue that Nick Land was writing about years ago, which is about what we would call disintermediation. Disintermediation is when you're no longer reliant upon the approved forms of communication. We no longer have Walter Cronkites or just the three news stations or the leading paper of record to tell us what to think. I mean, the explosion of the blogosphere, Facebook, YouTube, the internet in general has led to, ways in which people can seek alternative ways to live. And so these numbers are, I mean, impressive as hell. So at the time of writing, she has 1.74 million subscribers on YouTube, 307,000 followers on Twitter, banned from TikToks. The collecting different snippets of her videos had amassed over 603.7 million views on TikTok before she was banned. And it's done little to decrease her popularity. Well, this is why you need to be anti-fragile and be on other accounts. But I mean, it just illustrates that if you have an alternative and successful platform, you're always going to draw the eye of Sauron. But I mean, throughout the rest of this report, where
God, she's so awful. She says nothing original. She just plagiarizes every one of her talking points from other Manosphere people. And the only reason why people go and listen to her is because she's mid. Like, she seems attainable. It's the same reason why I don't know if you're aware of this, Brood, but the girls on OnlyFans that make the most money are the like moderately attractive ones because they appear to be like attainable. And that's basically the same thing that's going on with Pearl. She's not writing any new material. She has no great insight into the troubles of men or how to pick up a woman or how to establish frame or anything like this. There's just no value whatsoever.
Yeah, I've said this with Geo very often. I said, the whole girl next door fantasy is no longer just a fantasy. You can get her for $8 a month. Uh, and I think that's sort of a depressing realization. But I mean, we have
Yeah.
fallen so culturally to a point where, again, like, this is the promoted, advertised form of, like, this is the logical conclusion of liberation is women, being handed the crop and the whip that they will use to prostitute themselves with, and they've become their own pimps. And in doing so, congratulations, you have a society of whores. But
Yeah, they were
yeah.
given ultimate freedom and they still defaulted back to the world's oldest profession, which should tell you something.
And see, in Denise Candiotti's Bargaining with Patriarchy 1988, she lays out different culturally differentiated ways women strategize to gain security, safety, and authority within patriarchal society. In a quid pro quo that leaves sex-based oppression intact, the woman receives a desired position in exchange for any type of submission to men. Having bargained with the patriarchy, the woman has carved out an optimized, favorable place in the hierarchy for herself while leaving the system intact. Within the context of reappreciation of traditional gender roles, a growing contempt for women's sexual liberation, and increased exposure to misogynist content from the manosphere, some of these female influencers may be engaging in patriarchal bargaining. So it's Stockholm syndrome is what basically is what we're being
Yeah,
told.
I love how they try to intellectualize the fact that the chick wants to make money.
Yeah, basically. I mean, then again, we're talking more on this part about Pearl Davis, and there's been a million articles written about her, both by men and women, and she basically seeks a countercultural source, a foil to more classically liberal feminist activists and much more popular male members of conservative right-wing digital ecosystem. Example, Ben Shapiro. I have to laugh that he's right-wing and then he stretched the imaginations, but
Oh, she tweeted something out maybe 3 or 4 months ago. She said the top 5 most conservative people of all time, and the list included Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Thomas Sowell, and Jordan Peterson. There you
yeah.
go. There's your 5 most conservative people of all time.
So yeah, they have a database. See, again, this is sort of the data and society report all over again, but this time, the quote unquote manosphere. 36 channels that have been active within 2023, dedicated to a respective subgroup matter, which is MGTOW, PUA, incel, and men's rights activists. And so yeah, they've got their reports. 3.73 million subscribers. These accounts alone. A wide range of influence. So MGTOW moments, 25,000 subscribers, over 1,000 videos. MRA, so all sorts of accounts there. Um, to me, at the end of the day, this is very reminiscent of what we've seen before. But Honey Badger Radio, I'm familiar. I know who those are.
Yeah, I think another point I could raise here is one of the other things they try to do in the report. Again, they try to link the incel sphere directly to the manosphere, and one of the ways they do this is they use the old forum PUA hate forum as an example of this. Now, PUA hate came out of the actual Red Pill forum. They used to be on Reddit. It's now gone. Now it got nuked. The married Red Pill forum is still there, but the original one is gone. And what happened basically is right when the sphere was really starting to take off, they kind of had like two huge booms. There was one boom around like 2004, 2005, right around when Neil Strauss wrote his book, The Game. That was kind of like the first really big online boom you had. And then the second online boom you had was somewhat time around, 2013, 2014. Again, same time as like the really big cultural shifts were happening, like with Gamergate. This is also when Roald Tomasi's first book, The Rational Male, was released in paperback. It had already been in PDF form for years before that, but it got released in paperback. And so then you had this second big boom. And in this second big boom, you had a lot of guys coming to the original Red Pill forums. And they developed this forum called PUA Hate afterwards, because what happened was a lot of these guys, either because they were spurgs and they didn't know how to implement the techniques correctly, or, sometimes they were just, really like autistic or whatever it might be. Or maybe they got conned because there were a bunch of cons that were coming into the space at the time as well, like to grift off of it. So whatever happened, these guys basically failed to get the results that they were looking for, and they all conglomerated together in this forum called PUA Hate. And this forum is still there. And basically all they do now is just try to dox Manosphere guys, try to like come up with phony data to try and disprove a bunch of our points. So they spend all their time just attacking other Manosphere guys, and they also cross over into incel sphere stuff. And this is where a lot of like these radicalized guys that they claim spend most of their time in. So their argument basically is that, the Manosphere lures people in like an angler fish, and then they get swooped up into this sphere of like incel hate and everything like this afterwards. And their argument basically is that it's a radicalization pipeline, when really what it is the guys either did not implement their frame or their techniques correctly, or they got conned. So it's not a radicalization pipeline. It's more so you fucked up.
Let me ask you this question, because you know the ecosystem better than I do. One of the things that I think that the left was absolutely correct about when it came to, say, 2017, like I'm doing the whole thinking like a state thing. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm playing the regime thinking talking head. In like the 2016, 2017, 2018 period of, say, like the online right, for example, I think it was very clear and very demonstrable, based on a lot of my own viewers' experiences, based off what they've said, and certainly my own experiences as well, that there was sort of a quote unquote like libertarian to, say, like more dissident spheres of politics. And, I think that they were very right. And if, again, thinking from a state, like if I were to shut down a pipeline, I got to break the pipeline somewhere. So that means like deplatforming, banning, etc. And they did exactly that. I don't think it stopped them, but they did identify that there was sort of an ideological pipeline that, if you like what you hear, would you like to know more type deal. Do you see sort of a similar thing in this sphere? I mean, this is very different from politics. I would argue that maybe politics comes second in the manosphere for obvious reasons. Your goal is to improve yourself and to get with women. Do you see sort of a political pipeline there at all? Like, obviously, if you're more manosphere oriented, you're going to probably have a much more a less blue pilled or a less left wing view on politics. So do you yourself, knowing that area, knowing that sphere, knowing that you associate with people like me and other folks on the right, like, do you see a sort of a political pipeline existing there?
Yeah, there absolutely is, and there has been one since the very beginning. People, of course, will remember that Bronze Age Pervert himself came out of Manosphere forums on the old Chateau Hartiste forums, and there's been a rich history of guys, mostly specifically actually coming from like the Chateau Hartiste forums, because they actually used to talk about like racial issues and miscegenation and things like that on those forums. So that's like kind of the pipeline you're gonna get the most of. But there absolutely is a crossover here. I mean, I think you'd be really hard pressed to find like any guy in the Manosphere who isn't, right wing, and not necessarily in the way you and I would conceptualize it. Like, I think that there's every single guy on Rule Zero like votes Republican. It's just kind of like in the air. You want to be successful, you want to be wealthy, you want to have access to women, you want to have power, you want to be in the upper ends of a hierarchy and such. So yes, there absolutely is a crossover. How much of it actually, manifests itself in the kinds of things that you and I talk about, I'm not sure, but it definitely is there.
I figured as much, and so I can see why there's this renewed focus on it as well. I want to transition now to sort of the where I think some of this comes from. Because like when you and I both saw this report on Twitter, you were like, "Well, this is bullshit," and I was thinking to myself, "Well, I've seen this somewhere before," and this does have, I think, a lot of close connections to the foreign policy think tank side of the international relations sphere, particularly the subheading of what gets called feminist foreign policy. But before we go into that, what are some of your final thoughts on just this reporting, what we've seen in general? To me, I just, I see sort of a great concern, that hey, the internet can lead to violence. There's sort of this safetyism against a sort of progressive hegemony, and a way in which men who are seeking answers, if they go down a certain path, this could lead to extreme. The same thing we see with the online right, or virtually any sort of male dominated space on the internet. What are your sort of final thoughts on this report? And I will have this report linked in the description.
I think a couple of things. Number one, I think the first thing I'll say is that this report is just the beginning here, and this is just the first one we've caught. No doubt that there are other reports going around, other guys trying to get government contracts, for money here. I mean, these guys got 700 grand, I mean, which seems like a lot to any of us, but we all know that there's government programs that, rake in millions upon millions of dollars from people. So I suspect that this is just, breaking of the dam, so to speak. There will be more of these. I will say this as well, Prude. I don't know if you caught this, but this report was really shittily written. I think there was something on like the 15th page or something. They had the same paragraph in there twice, like, so clearly they did not, do a good job of even editing this thing and looking through it properly. But I think the other thing too, as well, is that all their solutions are bunk. They're all bullshit. We know this now. They're not going to work. It's okay to be a pussy and cry. And hey guys, guess what? Violence is bad. I'm sure that that's what all this is going to be. But everyone is always sitting there talking about, the men's rights community, the manosphere is at its day. It's on its way out. No, it could be further from the truth. Whether from their innate drive to have sex, or maybe they're just want to figure out what the hell is going on, they're going to pop into Google, why am I having issues, and they're going to find us. They'll be driven to the Manosphere because, like I'm saying, at the end of the day, the Manosphere is telling the truth. So, people like me, people like the other guys I associate with, we're not going anywhere. And we're probably only going to increase as more and more people do not address the actual underlying problems in society that are affecting men. They're going to continue to try and sweep things under the rug. And yeah, people like Rollo are going to be in business forever, man. Yeah, look at this. Every man. Yeah, I'm sure. Unbelievable.
Well, and again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I said just there is the eternal sales pitch of why settle when you can be better or you could be successful. I mean, this goes back to get ripped quick kind of exercise machines and tools that you could order on the back of a comic book. Like, people know where to target, people know where to talk. And I mean, I think there's a clear difference, I think, between, say, a de-radicalization project or a male-focused group that wants to support, like fishing the good fight. Like, to me, that sounds great, but I also know that this is now associated with an organization that's getting $700,000 from the federal government and the Department of Homeland Security to sort of de-radicalize me, or to put me on a progressive path. There's this tweet by Abdullah Yusuf, who's a a Muslim guy who kind of floats in these spheres. And this is maybe the one thing I'll agree with the Muslim on, but he was just like, therapy is where you pay a woman to talk to you until you turn into a liberal. And
It's so
that
true.
tweet's just evergreen. But again, like, explanation of key terms, black pill idea. So we have the solutions, of course, are where I want to use this as a jumping off point with respects to, say, the international relations sphere, because I think that there's a significant overlap between these two things: community groups, mental health technology, and content creators. So influencers, organizations, and tech. These are sort of like a three-pronged approach that you will see in any sort of like domestic social policy that is being implemented by like the State Department or the National Endowment for Democracy. We definitely see the content creator side, for instance, in foreign policy. Just look at Kings and Generals. Watch any of their like full-length documentaries on the war in Ukraine. You'll notice in the description of those videos, it'll say script written by so-and-so. And if you look up who that so-and-so is, it's by the National Endowment for Democracy. Who would have guessed? What a surprise that that America's foreign policy circles are utilizing these sort of content creators and so on to do so. And I think that's sort of an important thing to sort of consider. But yeah, now we've of course got the subject of what I call feminist foreign policy, and I do want to provide a definition. So this definition comes from a report from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and this is defining feminist foreign policy. I've heard this term for quite some time now. This report is from 2020. The first time I heard the phrase feminist foreign policy was in 2014. But we're going to share this now, and we're going to sort of dive into why I think there's a big overlap between these sort of two things. Feminist foreign policy is based on the recognition that women and men experience conflict and war differently. Because of their current different roles and positions in society, they face consequences from war and contribute differently to peace building. Traditional approaches to foreign and security policy, by contrast, are in essence gender blind and do not consider these differences on any real scale. This imbalance leads to incomplete political analyses and continued gender inequalities. This is in part, now as we're going to start getting into it, sort of this discussion over a quote unquote, what we would see incel movements, terrorism, the likelihood of men's militia groups and so on that are more one track minded. Now this sort of stuff gets said by quite a few people, not just the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, but also from the Department of Homeland Security. The Overseas Development Institute, ODI, some of you might know this think tank. They cover quite a few issues ranging from the ongoing war in Ukraine to climate and sustainability. ODI is a global affairs think tank, and they're relatively sort of just new to the scene, I would argue, but they're based out of England, and they work very closely with the British government on this. And they have a report that I think is very important to consider in respects to. Let me get to the page I wanted to get to, and then we'll get to it. So I'm going to share this tab instead here. So this is an ODI policy brief. And this is one of their solutions, or how to pursue a feminist foreign policy. What's next for feminist foreign policy on countering the anti-gender backlash? This just came out earlier this year. And actually just last month on the ODI brief. But I'm going to read this section for you all here. Counter harmful discourse narratives and conspiracy theories, especially in digital spaces. Digital spaces amplify reactionary voices, toxic masculinity, and regressive gender norms, even as they serve to elevate the voices of women during the hashtag MeToo and Marea Verde movements. Among others, unregulated social media platforms are now a site for vicious backlash. Reactionary actors use social media to cultivate and inflame anti-feminist support, use platforms to coordinate gender/mis and disinformation campaigns, often taking an extreme toll on women in politics. Hashtag she persisted in 2023. Furthermore, the conspiracy theory that gender ideology is being used to destroy the traditional family and a natural way of life is widely propagated online, mainly because it's true. There are also growing concerns about links between gender-based violence online, such as, quote, incel forums, and men's violence offline. So their goal, of course, would be to have technology-facilitated gender-based violence as a threat to democracy because it silences and harms the diverse voices of women. Tech companies have failed to protect women, especially especially those publicly visible and subject to multiple intersecting discriminations. Transnational and global nature of these companies underpins the problem of tracking online violence, including the spread of gendered disinformation and abuse campaigns, leading several governments to launch a global partnership for action on gender-based violence and harassment and abuse online. Now,
You
this was
notice
a
you notice how
yeah.
the first path that they always go to and take is to, and this happens in any space, male space or otherwise. Once the women come in, they have to immediately drop everything and make the space more appealing to women. We were just talking about earlier about how the way that we're going to fix things online is we're going to ban certain men from talking online. Well, how about you just ban the women from online in this case? You would never ever think about that. It's like, oh, if violence is being perpetrated against women online, why don't we just get rid of all the women? You'll never hear that, even though that would actually probably have very, very good. This is a take I've had for a very long time. Women should just be banned from social media outright. There's nothing positive coming from it. Maybe you can have like your little Instagram for you and your family members or something like that. But when you get women together online and they start talking, it's never a good thing.
Well, I like to work in the position of political reality. I don't think you're going to get a total ban on
Yeah,
them, but
no, absolutely. But you just, you just see where their thought process is,
well, yeah, and this is again the quote unquote feminist foreign policy. This is like one of the fifth suggestions that they have for this issue. Of course, sexual and reproductive rights, so the LGBTQ movement. Number three, avoid funding actors that create gender, that undermine gender equality and justice. So don't fund our enemies. So anti-gender actors operate in the European Union, U.S., Russia, Saudi Arabia. Citizen Go, Family Watch International, the World Congress of Families, which a lot of Christian priests will talk to and speak at the World Congress of Priests. There's a rather famous clip from Father Josiah Trenum, who spoke at the World Congress of Families, just basically saying, listen, this LGBT movement is like Satanist idolatry, and it's going to destroy the family, which he's correct. The Alliance Defending Freedom, a U.S.-based conservative Christian legal advocacy group working to expand Christian values within public schools and government, outlaw abortion, curtail the rights of LGBT groups. So, I mean, there's this overall intersection between the rise of what we would call feminist foreign policy, or the base. I hate to go back to 2014, 2013 talking points, Redhawk, but I don't think the right ever had an effective answer to intersectionality. That is the ultimate unifying tool of the left. It doesn't matter that you are a single issue voter, you're pro-vegan, you hate industrial farming, you hate animal cruelty, right? Does not matter. That makes you a progressive, which means you have to accept the trans question, you have to accept like gay race communism, you have to accept everything else. And I don't think the right ever had an answer to that. And I don't know, do you guys talk about that on your side of things? Because to me, I just don't. I've never seen that fully addressed or deconstructed or answered head on. And to me, I feel like that's the way that all this kind of gets unified for a political formula. That, like, you can say trans rights means Palestine liberation or whatever.
Mm, yeah, I mean, you'll definitely find some degree of discussion from guys, politics wise in the sphere. What we kind of came to the conclusion a couple of years ago, for a number of reasons. Number one, a lot of the people that find the Manosphere aren't exactly tuned in to political issues like you and I would be, or the other
Mhm.
guys we associate with. And the problem would ensue was, this is actually a really big problem on the Married Red Pill forum. One guy specifically, I forget his name, but he came in and started talking about Evola, funny enough. And the mods ended up just completely banning him outright for this, even though, talking about Evola seems interesting to guys like you and me. It's not productive for most guys to be focusing on political issues. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Ideally, in an ideal, insane world, most people would not be as politicized as they are now. And we kind of came to that conclusion a long time ago that if a guy is just trying to fix his marriage, or if he's trying to become more attractive and to not be unattractive, he really should not be focusing on these political issues at all. You need to be focusing on going into the gym, or doing a cold approach, or combing your hair, or literally anything else. And then politics, go get your political fill elsewhere. So at this point, from any of like the legit, like higher up guys in the sphere who are actually doing good work, they more or less just keep politics out of it, except, very basic, normie right-wing conservative talking points, some of them will come out with. Like I said, you're never going to hear any like mainstream Democrat talking points or support for like the Democrat Party coming out of like anyone in the Manosphere at this point. I mean, they're all right-wing guys, but not in the way you and I would conceptualize that term.
Yeah, no, and I think that the average person should the views of the average person should probably be sort of like the default conservative position. I mean, not in the liberal sense, but in the sense that like, family is important. We shouldn't be having a society that makes it difficult to construct family formation. We shouldn't be doing things that would, promote the likelihood of my children not being able to get married, have kids, and have a successful job. Like, it's the Tucker Carlson line, like if your system prevents me from that happening, I should burn your system down. I think that's a very like that should be a default position. No one needs to be a hardcore political theorist to understand these things. Like you can talk about writing the tiger all you want, but know that you are part of a small subgroup of people that know exactly what the hell you're talking about. And I do agree with that. But to go back to this ODI brief, these are the recommendations they make. Raise digital policy up to the global agenda of tackling online misogyny, create global standards of countering backlash online, design digital and algorithmic regulatory measures. So again, more censorship. Establish coalitions and cross-sectoral mechanisms. Invest in formulating alternative online narratives to counter anti-gender myths. So no more hate facts, everybody. Invest in digital literacy education, training, and programming to build citizens' skills to identify disinformation, protect against radicalization, and lead safe lives online. So basically, if you want to ensure that the great gay disco can continue, then you have to silence everybody else, which is nothing new for us here. But this is sort of the cross section between, oh, we have male spaces that are trying to dedicate themselves to male problems. People should know that I'm not a big PUA or Manosphere guy. However, I think that both the Manosphere are sort of like maybe more traditional sides of things. I don't even call myself trad, but both are trying to get to the issue that the way men used to live is gone, and that male problems are systemically ignored and exacerbated by the regime. And here are answers to solve those problems. As you've said famously, Redhawk, it's a praxology. It's not really an ideology. It's just a way to
Yeah,
apply
no.
these systems to your life.
Hmm.
And everything here is basically saying we're going to continue to double down on the ways in which men have been forced into proverbial online, but also very physical corners in their real world. I mean, this collides and, dare I say, intersects with, of course, the issues of, our current. It's the basic point about women in the workplace. Not only am I competing against well qualified men, I'm also competing against women for the position. I'm competing against an ideology that promotes a semblance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like this all interacts and it all comes together to illustrate, like, yeah, we're going to continue to force men in a corner, which is why you wonder, hey, like the military recruitment numbers are shit. I wonder why. Well, you don't have a reason for them to live. There was a report that came out, this was shared by Thultide, and it was a report on the impact of the impact of elections on fertility. And it said that the election of Donald Trump raised the white fertility rate by a statistically significant margin to the equivalent of financial incentives and increased expansions of working child tax credits. And it decreased immigrant fertility on the same level as unemployment affects fertility. And I thought that, when you give people a reason to live, people are more hopeful, people are more likely to have kids, they're more optimistic about the future. They're going to do it, they're going to procreate, or they're going to feel like they can procreate, that their children have a future. They're not going to be asking what's the point. And again, it goes back to the demoralization. And, if we're going to be spouting out sort of a demoralization 24/7, I think that this is what you're seeing on a massive scale, especially in the Western world. Not only are you panicking about things like climate change, and that there's a 15% was a poll I saw last year saying that, yeah, like climate change is a very serious reason why we're not having children. Throw this on top of it, you wonder why things have gotten so bad. And this is already on top of things like immigration, a really bad financial and monetary policy. They all are just, there's no one silver bullet to the problem, but it does illustrate how multifaceted it is that affects the way men live their lives, and why they're not happy, or why they feel like they're driven to extreme ends. And they can say that they're reaching out with a hand to do this, but we know in the other hand there's a giant hammer ready to smash your skull in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the absurdity of it all, that We are bringing this whole entire security state down on a small group of guys on the internet that probably isn't even numbering, in the millions at this point. That's probably like the high end of it. That you have all the views and all the content creators and all the posters and everything from the last 25 years of the blogosphere and such. Yeah, it's probably in the millions at most. But then you look at the huge apparatus of what you're looking at on the other side, like how everyone, the entire society, the entire media industry, the entire social media industry, the entire government, everyone is just posting nonstop feminism, nonstop everywhere. All the male institutions are gone. The male spaces are gone. I was turning on ESPN in a bar not too long ago, and you got two female commentators talking about football. It's like, well, what the fuck do you have to say on that? You never played the damn sport. So there is nowhere left for men to go except a obscure Reddit forum for guys that were struggling with their marriages and struggling to pick up girls. And this is the last vestige of male spaces. And even that's not good enough. It's like that Terminator meme with the girl like cowering under the desk. It's like, we'll hunt you down no matter where you go. Are the men having fun over there? Are the men communicating amongst themselves? We can't have that.
So this is the last article I wanted to bring up today. And this is one of the things that had really, it's like that, I don't know what movie it was, but it's like, this has triggered a core memory. And it's like, I remember reading this article years ago, and like reading the online sort of men's rights manosphere report made me think about the motivations for why people are brought to terror. So this is from a report from Valerie Hudson and Hillary Matfis. This is from the Military Review Journal, January, February 2018. And you're going to look at this and you're going to wonder, well, what the hell does this have anything to do with the manosphere? And I will happily explain. But I'm going to share this tab instead now. So the neglected role of bride price and catalyzing instability and violent conflict. January, February 2018, Military Review. After the stream, I will update the links in the description so you guys can access this stuff as well. Now, this is primarily to do with Africa and parts of the Muslim world in Southeast Asia. However, the basic role of what we would traditionally call patriarchal societies, or what's the word that they use? Marriage and patrilineal cultures. Whose father was yours? Like, would you come from good stock? These kind of questions. And one of the stories they tell is about Muhammad Ajmal Amir Kassab, age 21, begged police interrogators to turn off the cameras. They recorded his confession about a terror attack that was done in 2008 in Mumbai, India. When they were asking, Kassab had recounted that his father had told him his participation would mean the family would no longer be poor and they had to pay the cost to finalize a marriage contract. One of the police officers, seemingly ignoring Kassab's response, said, "So you came here for jihad, is that right?" Crying, Kassab asks, "What jihad?" Lashkar just deposited the promised money in his father's account after the successful attack. Kassab was, of course, hanged in 2012 by the Indian government. However, the issue was over marriage and the price of marriage and bride price. And so when we look at reports in the United States about men having less sex than the previous generation beforehand, millennials are having less children than beforehand, we're not having successful family formation. We call it, like, there were reports from like the Atlantic and others saying that the natalist conference that happened at the beginning of this month, like last weekend, was full of racists and Nazis because they're trying to address the fundamental issue that family formation is dying. People aren't having sex and people aren't dating and courting to have families. And so you're seeing sort of the Western material equivalent of what we would call bride price. Both for ideological and cultural reasons. Primarily for us in America, it's more progressive than it is, say, patriarchal or patrilineal. But I'm seeing an obvious overlap between these two spaces. And so, they say that a patrilineal social system is where persons are accounted akin through the male or agnatic line. A millennium ago, the overwhelming majority of societies were organized along patrilineal lines. The 21st century, by contrast, the international system is comprised of states that the societies are arrayed along a spectrum of non-patrilineality to strong patrilineality. Of course, it's a security issue. But this report to me was talking about just the fact is that bride price has been on the rise in places in sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and in Southeast Asia, particularly India, where this is meant to bring women into relationships. And this, of course, means usually these cultures don't have any property rights, no political rights, or really marital rights, no right to a divorce or anything outside of the whole I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you thing within Islam. But I mean, again, like you have a male status in patrilineal societies is strongly linked to marriage. Like if you're not married and you're not anything and you can't succeed, there's no life for you. You are a social outcast. And for a lot of guys in, say, in the West, a lot of guys I know who ask questions all the time, like, how do I pick up chicks? How do I get married? How do I become successful? Again, you're seeing, I think, a very strong overlap about the policies that are looking towards, well, why do people join these organizations? Why do they become terrorist organizations? Because they're asking, they're offering a way out. Listen, if you join us, you become a jihadist, you do whatever, you yourself will then be given money so you can acquire a woman and buy your property, buy your woman, buy your wife, have your sons, achieve social status. And again, this is why I tell people all the time to read a book, Thinking Like a State, or Think Like a State, Seeing Like a State by James C. Scott. You have to look at things from the perspective of government. And if I'm a government official and I'm noticing like this rise of like how to pick up women, how to have an ideology that's not progressive in order for you to get laid and to get married or whatever, all of a sudden, your alarm bell is ringing in the back of your head. Hey, we've seen this before, and I've seen it in sub-Saharan Africa. I've seen it in India. I've seen it in Afghanistan. And this is clearly a terrorist problem because unlike, terrorism over there where they have maybe Islam as the primary format of cultural communication, some imam or some, Taliban leader group saying do XYZ, here you can have online social disintermediation where people can tell you here's how to actually do it. Don't be a liberal, don't be a feminist, XYZ. And for them, all these think tanks are just seeing dollar signs and they're seeing potential terrorists. And there's no men's state in America where there's a bunch of like MGTOW militias going around, but they can cite people like what happened in Allen, Texas. They can cite what happened in 2014 with Elliot Rodger or other groups, and they're noticing this trend and they're seeing the connection. And I think that there is sort of an overlap, and this is why the feminist foreign policy lens about terrorism and bride price and access to women, they're just applying it over here to the United States and to the Western world within the Manosphere, the MRA scene, etc. And I think that this is where you see a very clear overlap between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. I also found this piece particularly, subversive in some of the arguments they were trying to make, particularly on the patrilineal lineage. They were arguing that, because the line is passed down from the male and the husband and onto the sons and such, that means that there's no protection and no rights for women. And they were trying to make the argument that this form of conducting your society in sub-Saharan Africa is just like what we do over here with the patriarchy in America. And so they're trying to, again, draw comparisons here when really the issue that's going on here, more so than anything else in sub-Saharan Africa and India, is that their countries have some of the highest population density in the entire world. They blew up way too fast, largely to the assistance of Western technology that found its way into these countries. And they had huge population booms, and they don't know what to do about it now. And so therefore, because you have such a surplus of men and women in these countries, and because a women's hypergamous filter is never going to be, undone, it's just part of the machine. So you have a lot of disaffected young men. And this is just what happens. When men don't get access to sex, they develop itchy trigger fingers.
And I mean, this is the same thing that they were reporting here. Consider the findings from a report by a Tanzanian women's organization following an extensive survey that due to bride price, women suffer insults, abuse, battery, denial of their rights to own property, being overworked, and having to bear a large number of children. In addition, the report noted that women also complained of some men's tendency to reclaim the bride price when the marriages broke up, saying the fear of this outcome forced women to cling to their marriages even when abused.
Yeah,
of course,
so because these women in uncivilized countries have problems in the marriage marketplace, that means we have to implement gay feminism all over the world because it's worked so well over here in the West, right?
I mean, that's the modus operandi for a lot of how to fix these issues. And I'm not saying that, again, I don't think we should be involved in, Kenya or Tanzania or Afghanistan with respects to these sort of feminist issues. But noticed that there was a very sharp change when we talk about like the Middle East, for example. Is you remember? I think it's like one of the earlier episodes, like right after we invaded Afghanistan. There's this episode of like Law and Order SVU, and it's talking about like honor killing and this young girl had been sexually assaulted or abused or something, and they're talking about again sort of this propagandizing nature of to understand that this is how this oppressive foreign system works against our sort of enlightened, trendy, new atheist, Western society where they hate us for our freedom. And we saw that even more so after we pulled out Afghanistan. All the women's schools, closed down. The hijab and the burqa is all back, and this is terrible. They're all, and of course, more people are going to relocate to Europe and the United States. We're going to bring them over here, which of course is why like Somalia is basically Minneapolis at this point, and it's so again we have to be liberating and feminizing across the world. Not saying that I'm not endorsing abuse, battery, or anything like that. I don't think that you should be beating women or anything like that. You should all know this, by the way, by now. I hate the fact that I have to
Yeah.
fucking state it, but you should know that this is an anti-wife beating channel. God, in case anyone wants to take that shit out of context, we're anti-wife beating here. But you see, again, they're treating this like bride price and marriage market obstruction. So you have taxes, male kindred. Most bride prices pegged to what's considered the going rate within society at any given point. In the West, we have a going rate, about the whole traditional like 6 feet, 6 figures, 6 inches.
Hmm.
It's a little different than, let's say, a savage backwater, but there's I think a comparable aspect to say what gets traditionally called the sexual marketplace, or what traditionally is called of being a successful high status male. And if you don't have access to that, or if you feel like the economic system is preventing you from being a part of that, yeah, people are going to go to the manosphere. People are going to go to the trads. People are going to go to the right wing and say, well, why are things so screwed up? Why are things so messed up in regards to how men and women get along? And if you like the answer, people are going to stay. They're going to look for other answers. They're going to see that there's a bigger problem. And of course, we don't have a standardization for what makes men and women get married and get together. I think that women have disastrously overblown expectations. Porn brain men have over expectations where sex is the only thing that they center on, and they don't focus on the fact that, like, listen, man, you're addicted to your left hand and the internet. You're not doing any things to improve your ability to talk to women or whatever. Like, here's the way to do that. And so, yeah, like I see an obvious overlap between, say, the foreign policy aspect of this world, which is the uh, sexual marketplace, the feminist foreign policy, and well, how do we promote feminist foreign policy abroad? And now that we've seen the disintermediation online with the Manosphere, or say like the Christian men, or even Jonathan Pageau and Jordan Peterson. All of a sudden, if you listen to those guys, you're a right wing extremist. We have to target you. We have to make sure they're not a Nazi. Do you have Telegram on your phone, et cetera, et cetera? All these things to me illustrate a clear overlap that anything that happens abroad on quote unquote the war on terror, this administration, especially under Biden, has made it abundantly clear that domestic terrorism, which is predominantly targeted at straight white men, you're the real threat, and they're going to treat it like that. So, if you're complaining about women or birth rates or anything like that, congratulations, you're probably on a list somewhere, and that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, they listed that in that original diverting hate report. The four biggest threats to the United States government as it relates to at home is white supremacist terrorism, Christian nationalism, anti-government rhetoric, and the manosphere. So,
Yeah, and I mean, even the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, in a report published earlier this year in 2023, had put out a study regarding towards the global incel movement and how it's on the rise in Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America, and that these sort of ideologies globally illustrates that hundreds of thousands of people look into it. Websites ranging from redpilltalk.com to looksmax.org has increased significant online traffic, and even the Australians are concerned that this will somehow affect them, and that therefore they conclude that this is a global issue that needs increased public awareness, with the concern of the rise of extremist ideologies. And so you're seeing, I think, a very coordinated effort that as men realize that they're sort of being locked out and people are looking for answers, you're going to grow sort of a security apparatus behind that. Either just accept the, Great Zimbabwe, accept the sort of gay race commune that we talk about, or suffer the consequences. And there again, this is going to apply to our the political formula that in the Mosca sense, everything needs a political formula in order to sell it back to the people. We like to sell ourselves a warm fuzzy, and the warm fuzzy that we're selling sort of the West right now, or at least its elites are, is this nice, comfortable, we're feminist, we're progressive, gay rights for all. We're going to like push for the decriminalization of homosexuality across the globe, and we're going to make sure that incel terrorism is taken care of, even though it's a minority problem outside of religious fundamental groups, primarily within Islam. But this is where you're at, and I think that it's very important to consider that the literature from 2018, which really goes back even further to 2014, 1997, 1998. They're talking about from 2000 to 2004, wedding costs in Egypt rose by 25%. All of a sudden, this is now a problem that we can apply to the West as well. And that's
well, it just goes to show you they've been talking about these issues for over 20 years at this point, and they've done absolutely nothing to actually fix the underlying problem. Again, like we were talking about earlier, Brood, you're just talking about how they're, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, basically. And that's all that they're doing. So this kind of stuff is going to continue. We haven't talked about it much because it wasn't really talked about in either of these reports, but one of the countries that is suffering the most right now as it relates to the incel problem is actually South Korea. And their fertility rates are even less than ours. I think it's like 0.7 now is their rate. It's just dropping off a cliff. And this is largely a result of another issue that we haven't really talked about, but the sexual marketplace is now becoming global. And what's happening in South Korea is that because South Korea is a rich country and they're very egalitarian over there, the women make a bunch of money and then they just go abroad and they marry foreigners. And this is becoming significantly, an issue in other third world countries, because we know this from all the data, and you can look at this from like a dating app data as well, that the number one desired group as it relates to men is white men. So at least we got something to look forward to,
But I mean, that does go back to the basic issue over immigration as well.
Yeah.
I mean, like Japan hasn't done it yet. And in fact, Japan just had a recent, their equivalent of the Supreme Court had basically ruled if you have dual citizenship, you basically give up your Japanese citizenship. So, I mean, they're still on the very anti-foreigner lens. But, I mean, there's discussion over immigration there. There's a discussion over immigration in South Korea. I mean, there was a quote-unquote incel political movement in one of their most recent presidential elections. It really does illustrate that this is a global phenomenon that, listen, globalization, the commodification of the sexual marketplace, has led to widespread disastrous consequences in traditional pair bonding, to where, yeah, men are going to be radicalized in a vastly different direction. Women are going to go in the opposite direction of that. And now no one is screwing each other. No one is happy. And it's the classic paradox of female happiness. Western or more capital-minded women in South Korea, example, are some of the most quote-unquote liberated women on earth. And they're also the most unhappiest. And look no further than, say, America's usage of SSRIs within white women. I mean, it's insane.
Gee, Prude, don't you think patriarchy was a wondrul system? I mean, it only worked for a couple thousand years, I don't know.
Yeah, what's the word I look for? Yeah, it works. It just works, as Todd Howard would say. It just works.
Yep.
Anything else, Mr. Redhawk, before we maybe wrap it up here? I think that it's important for people to consider that anytime that people talk about it as a terrorist issue, you will always find a litany of literature that was talking about this in the international side of things, 5 to 10 years prior, especially in this millennia. I like this comment from EC. Please pay no attention to the functional patterns of civilization.
Yeah, nothing here. Please disperse.
Please disperse. Men at work. Please disperse.
I think the only conclusion, I'll add to this here is that this kind of stuff is going to continue because the powers that be are not interested in actually fixing the underlying problems, and they're more interested in just ensuring that people can't talk about the problems, or we're going to suppress the information about people talking about the problems. Again, like we were talking about, just putting band-aids on gaping wounds here. So this stuff will continue. The male loneliness and unhappiness rate is going to increase. Same thing with women. There's no brakes on this train anytime soon for society as a whole. However, that does not mean, to go swallow a bunch of black pills here and look into the abyss. I do think it is arguably easier than ever for you as a guy to separate yourself from the sludge, basically. I mean, what's your competition? Like, somebody like Destiny is your competition now. So I feel like there is a lot of space for guys like us who are switched on to these issues to make the best of it, make the best of a shitty situation, just because your competition is so pathetic. So if you get out there, you learn some techniques, you learn to be likable, you learn how to hold a conversation, you hit the gym, you can find success in this day and age. It's going to be different. You're going to have different challenges than our forefathers had to deal with. But, what else are you going to do? Sit and mope?
Yeah, Turnip's got a really good point here. I think this is just as about a direct proof that one could have that we live under a matriarchy, right? I think Unwin might have written about that.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this is the global security apparatus working together to basically just deconstruct and destroy the traditional ways in which men and women got together, pair bonded, mated, had children. I've always said that leftism and progressivism is suicidal ideation on a civilizational scale. And that's just echoing what Burnham has written about. It's echoing what Chesterton has said. It's echoing basically every right-wing conservative position throughout history. Give women the power. I mean, there's a whole Greek Aristophanes play about this,
Yeah, assembly women, yes.
So, but no, to really just conclude this out here, ladies and gents, that the global war on terror comes at home. The issue of the sexual marketplace, the atomization between men and women, gender relations, the quote-unquote gender wars have only exacerbated pair bonding as we know it. Men look for answers as to why their lives are pretty shitty. Um, and when that happens, you see the security apparatus follow right in tow as men look for answers. As we've noticed, every time when men organize, get together, look for solutions to society's problems, that's always labeled by a threat to the regime. And so when you have a non-progressive way of life in the international relations sense of the word, you are a revisionist state. You wish to change how the world operates. And the left right now has its global hegemony for the moment. And that makes you a revisionist, and that makes you a threat in their eyes, simply because you want to do what all men have done as your forefathers have done, which is to be successful, be married, and to reproduce and to carry on your genes, which is the natural human instinct and drive as ordained by God. So, if that means that you go down the say the red pill manosphere route, or you look towards traditional groups in Christianity, it doesn't matter. The FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, they're all looking at you. Whether you're the FBI investigating tradcasts, or you've got these feminist organizations, quote unquote, diverting hate, getting $700,000 from the Department of Homeland Security, working with the McCain Institute to do these things.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's right. We
yeah.
forgot to mention even who the sponsor was. Yes, that McCain, that John McCain, who's currently burning in hell. Yes.
Yes. It's absolutely insane to deal with here. But with that being said, Mr. Redhawk, where can people find you?
Most of my work these days is just dedicated to the OGC. But if you guys are more interested in my own personal work, you can check out my own channel, Redhawk. Usually stream once a week there. You can also check me out on Twitter and my own Substack. And please subscribe to the Old Glory Club. We're doing a lot of good stuff over there. We've got big announcements coming into next year as well. So thank you for having me on, Prude. I think we did a good job, dissecting this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as the stream ends, I will update the links down below in the description to add all of those things. I will echo, of course, the Old Glory Club. You should be subscribing there. We're going to have some very big announcements coming very soon regarding things such as conferences and meetups and chapter formations. So things are going really great over there. And then our good friend Mr. Turnip Merchant will be streaming shortly at 11 o'clock my time, so 12 p.m. Eastern. He's got a topic going on regarding one of my favorite Western philosophers, Soren Kierkegaard. So by all means, head on over to Turnip Merchant's channel. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you all next time. Take care and God bless.